National Innovation Strategy. The Nation Station Oman FM, with the cooperation of the Research Council, presents Innovation Roadmap, an introduction to National Innovation Strategy from the Research Council.
Welcome to Innovation Roadmap. I'm Lakshmi, Kothaneth. We've been looking at various pillars of the National Innovation Strategy, NIS. Today, we are looking at economic diversification pillar. Our guest is Khalfan Mohammed Barwani, Dr. Khalfan Mohammed Barwani, Vice President, Investment and Market Operation. So, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for having me here. And first and foremost, I would like to extend my appreciation to the Research Council for developing the strategy, as well as providing a platform, the media platform, to convey the message of innovation, which is very critical for diversifying the economic base. Thank you for having me here again. Thank you.
What has been your experience like being part of the pillar?
It has been an experience of giving as well as learning, because it consists of members from various government institutions and the ministries and so on and so forth. I brought from my side the economic experience, and some people brought innovation experience. So we sat together and we exchanged ideas, and eventually we came up with a strategy that hopefully will be able to implement it without any difficulties. Yes.
Before we go actually into the subject, yes, I want to know, with your immense experience on economy, innovation, is it taking off, are we really going to become an innovative economy? Is this the only solution? Is it the future?
Of course, innovation is part and parcels of developing any economy. But the key is, if we can address subsequently in the interview, is what type of platform you have in order to innovate, and what do you require? What are the components? What are the elements? All these are very critical, but for sure, innovation is very critical. And there are two types of innovation. Basically, you can have an inherent innovation that you produce something from the beginning, or you can have an inception in terms of innovation, or you can use innovation to innovate. Apply innovation to innovate. You can use technology, for example, to become more efficient, to find ways, to improve whatever you do in terms of services or manufacturing and so on and so forth. These are all within the context of innovation, yes.
Which is very interesting. So let's go into our topic of the day, economic diversification. So according to you, what are the elements that guarantee economic freedom? Because that is one of the major elements for diversification, isn't it?
Indeed. The basic forms, elements that guarantee economic freedom include the right of any individual to have control over his or her possessions or properties, as well as his or her labor. In other words, people can choose either they want to work or not, invest or consume with no hindrance whatsoever. Again, that is economic freedom at its purest form. But as we all know, reality is far from what is pure insofar economic freedom is concerned. Every country has institutional arrangement within which economic activities take place. Among others, this institutional arrangement includes the rule of law, under which you have environmental laws, you have labor laws, you have commercial laws, property rights, monopoly laws, and so on. Additionally, you have taxation on businesses, properties, and other forms of income. Ideally, the rule of law and taxation are designed to allow economic freedom within a society in order to protect and create level playing fields, and in some cases, redistribution of income, as is the case of taxation, for example. Example will be for small businesses to be protected against monopoly. This is the case of rule of law or oligopolies, or for innovators to have their property right protected by the rule of law. But these are just few examples I can throw out there with respect to the rule of law. Yes.
In economic freedom.
Exactly, yes.
Would it differ from country to country, the economic freedom?
Yes, of course, the extent of economic freedom varies from country to countries based on elements such as effectiveness of rule of law, the size of the government, regulatory efficiency, and open markets. These four categories actually constitute the pillars under which the Heritage Foundation, which is an American-based think tank, account for measuring the extent of economic freedom in a given country. If I may elaborate a bit more on these measures, which are in effect a combination of both quantitative and qualitative factors to form indices. In the case of the Heritage Foundation, there are 12 factors or subcategories under the 4 categories mentioned earlier. Under the rule of law, you have property rights, government integrity, and judicial effectiveness. Under government size, you have government spending, you have tax burden, and fiscal health. On regulatory efficiency, you have business freedom, labor freedom, and monetary freedom. And on open market, you have trade freedom, investment freedom, and financial freedom. In terms of index, the 12 subcategories are brought together, with each ranging from 0 to 100. The average among the 12 subcategories will constitute a ranking for a country. In the 2018 report, for example, Oman ranked 93, with an average score of 61 out of 100, and among 180 countries, just after Croatia and before Honduras. You have other institutions such as the World Bank that issue annual reports on countries' performance on how easy it is to do business that can be elaborated subsequently in our interview.
So in order for us to jump from 61%, what do we need?
There is a lot that can be done. And I think more importantly is to make sure to identify where our weaknesses are and to learn from other countries. The example of Morocco. Morocco jumped from 120 something as in terms of ranking in 2010, I believe to 67 in 2018. They must have done something right. We don't have all the solution, and in the meantime, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Again, the issue that have been mentioned here, how effective are we in bureaucracy? How do we protect our rights? How much do we spend on research and development? How much is there as an encouragement for people to make mistakes? Funding for innovators and incubators, things of that nature are very critical, for us to grow. But again, going back on my initial introduction, and the Research Council has taken initiative to make sure that innovation becomes the part of the Omani economy. And that's very critical as a starting point. But how we move forward is a function of many institutions, including schools, family, culture, and so on and so forth.
You said something so interesting, is that how much of freedom do people have to make mistakes?
Exactly. Because
this is very interesting.
Absolutely. Innovation is about making mistakes. It's very rare to have somebody innovating something or coming up with a new product or a new idea succeeding the first time. Many have failed. But then you have to have an ecosystem, you have to have a platform where people can make mistakes and go back and learn from the mistakes and maybe be able to find funding, be able to make sure that if they come back and the right will be protected, and be sure that the market will be there to support them, and either through government entities or either through public-private partnership or through private sectors. This is very critical, but making mistakes is part of being innovative. It's as simple as that, and this is reality.
Very interesting. I hope that's a message that goes to everybody, because a lot of people give up too soon.
Absolutely.
When they're so close to succeeding.
Thank you.
So how would you rate the market development? You explained about the monopoly, and I think Oman has progressed. We've seen all those kind of stages.
Indeed, yes.
How would you rate it?
First, the extent to which a market is developed is a function of multiple factors, such as how a given economy is developed. Is the economy underdeveloped, emerging, or developed? I mean, these factors are very critical. More importantly, the extent of the market development is linked to the measure of economic freedom that we have mentioned earlier. Other measures include the sophistication for deepening of the financial sectors. So in other words, how effective and efficient the financial sector, for example, to provide loans or to identify sectors where they can benefit from. And this sector can actually be beneficial to the economy as a whole. Other measures include how active the stock market is, and more importantly, how active the secondary market. Active secondary market tend to be very conducive toward deepening the financial sector. This is something actually that is a little bit lacking in Oman. In Oman, we have an active primary stock market with albeit with fewer participants, but the secondary market is still very lacking in Oman. And that's very critical. It's one of the many components that's required to have a deepening of the financial sector and make sure that the market develops.
I was interested because we're also looking in diversification. We also need investors because that's another source of capital.
Absolutely. Diversifying the economic base is first and foremost to provide policies that encourage foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment, and what do they look for? Again, they look for the rule of law. It's very critical. Do you have bankruptcy law? Do you have insolvency laws? Do you have little red tape? Do you have less bureaucracy? And how fast are the procedures? These are very critical as far as the rule of law and bureaucracy is concerned. FDI also, foreign direct investment, also ask for stability. Alhamdulillah, in Oman we have political stability. People have come to invest, and as you know now, there is Tanfith, which is an institution that has been set up to channel all the energy, effort, and policy toward promoting FDI. And the results start showing up a little bit. But one thing about foreign direct investment, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a little bit of time, but we have seen some of the fruit. Recent investment in Duqm and other places, in tourism, in petrochemicals by the Kuwaitis and other countries. So the result starts showing up, and hopefully we will be able to move toward more foreign direct investment in the future. But provided, of course, we provided an effective and efficient ecosystem to support the foreign direct investment. Absolutely.
So can you tell us more about the effectiveness of business environment? You have given us an insight,
yes.
But if you were to look at it just on the business environment, what would you say?
What I would say is an effective business environment strikes a balance, actually, between factors such as rule of law and procedure on one hand, with efficiency for investors to invest, starting a new business or operating an existing business on the other hand. The World Bank, for instance, ranks countries on annual basis in a report called Easy of Doing Business. That include 190 countries, as alluded to earlier. I am sure some of your listeners are aware of this report. It's quite popular in Oman. The index look into things like regulatory environment, as is the case for the Heritage Foundation, and include indicators on resolving insolvency cases and enforcing contracts, among others. To what extent these regulations are conducive to start or run a business in a country? Actually, the index has 41 indicators, ranging from number of procedures to start a business or getting electricity to the time it takes to complete these procedures. In 2018, Oman ranked 71 out of 190 countries with a score of 67.2 out of 100. But again, I mentioned the example of Morocco. As I said earlier, Morocco went from 120 rank something to 69 in 2018. What have they done right? What can we learn from them? Is it not possible for us to move from the rank we have at the moment to up? Of course we can. But again, it's a combination of many factors where the government will have to work together, weaknesses have to be identified, and there will have to be a will, to move, to make decisions. Some of them can be quite difficult at the beginning. But again, it's like a long-term investment. At the beginning, you have a little bit of pain, a little bit of a cost, but for the better future. That's the idea.
The will. There itself, you see innovation. To think differently.
Yes.
So innovation comes in different forms. We'll take a short break. Our guest is Dr. Khalfan Mohammed Al-Barwani, Vice President, Investment and Market Operation, Central Bank of Oman, and he is the member of the Economic Diversification Pillar of National Innovation Strategy, supervised and facilitated by the Research Council. We'll be back.
The transformation towards a smart government, the development of existing policies, the consolidation of the culture of innovation, and the simplification of government procedures are among the most important pillars of institutional and social integration for the empowerment of innovation.
You are listening to the National Innovation Strategy.
You're listening to Innovation Roadmap, and our guest is Dr. Khalfan Mohammed Al-Barwani, Vice President, Investment and Market Operation. And in this edition, we're looking at Economic Diversification Pillar of National Innovation Strategy, NIS. So today we are looking at economic diversification, and we've gone through many of the questions we had in mind, and now something more about the business environment itself. It basically brings in all the sectors: Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Oman Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ministry of Manpower, PEIE, because manufacturing is part of it too. So what innovative measures would you recommend to achieve the stability, financial stability?
I will move into financial stability a bit later on, but let me first start by saying, beyond coordination or initiatives between relevant government institutions and public-private partnership to promote innovation, a society or a country require an effective ecosystem, as I said earlier, that provide a platform for innovators to succeed. In this ecosystem, we have schools and university that have role to play through their curriculum to promote critical thinking and ability to take calculated risk based on informed decisions. Families which can afford to provide an environment where children can initiate ideas or innovate should do so. This is part of the culture of innovation. The need for not just more spending on research and development, but targeted and effective spending by the government, private sectors and university, or in collaboration for that matter, is a must to promote innovation. Effective property rights for innovators is critical as well. Other critical components for an effective ecosystem include sources of funding for innovators as venture capitals and angel investors, as well as effective support for startup through business incubators. These are just few examples of what could be done in order to promote innovation.
Dr. Khalfan, you talked about angel investors.
Yes.
Could you tell us, because I think in Oman we need to see more of angel investors?
Indeed, in Oman we just don't have to see more of angel investors, we also need to see more of venture capitalists.
Venture capitalists, yes.
Absolutely, both. But again, there is a cultural element that involves people willing to help and assist and provide information. There's also another cultural element as far as venture capital is concerned, is the willingness to take risk. Because as I said earlier, most innovative ideas and products do not succeed in the market. There are reasons that I can elaborate later on why they don't succeed. But nonetheless, angel investors are required to help people who don't have, for example, assistance. It could be as simple as to advise potential innovators about finance, if you have specialty in finance. It could be financing them about the market need. It could be about financing them how to get a permit. It could be anything. It could be an idea about how to market your ideas and products. So, of course, angels investors are very critical, and they are part and parcel of a success for innovation to take hold in any country and to be sustained and grow. Yes.
Okay. So, and then the other part is, of course, what innovative measures would you recommend personally to achieve financial stability? Because whether they are startups, SMEs, or the established organizations, economies of the world move around, they go up and down, and accordingly the stability gets affected to financial stability.
Indeed.
So
yes.
What would you recommend?
Actually, this is a little bit of a tricky question. Central banks, for instance, have a role to play in promoting financial stability. The challenge is to strike a balance, again, between allowing financial institutions, including banks, to become innovative in terms of their products and use of technology on one hand, and make sure these innovations are within the framework of banking law that through its macroprudential regulations is mandated to ensure financial stability. Actually, history, including recent ones, teach us that effective regulations are required to promote financial stability. This is not to say that financial institutions should not invest in innovative products through existing technologies or technologies developed in-house. An example of innovation in the financial sector will be, for instance, how to serve existing customers with as little cost to the banks or to the customers as possible. You can use technology, you can use other means to do so. It's part of innovation as well. Or, for that matter, how to reach potential customers who live in remote areas using technology or providing relevant products in an efficient manner. These are all part of innovation. Again, as I said earlier, innovation not just about providing something that is completely new. It's also an idea of using existing technology and ideas in order to make yourself more efficient. These are all within the context of innovation, absolutely. It is important to state that one of the key prerequisites for a vibrant and innovative financial sector is competition among financial institutions. Indeed, competition to a large extent works as an incentive to innovate by finding ways to reduce operating costs or reach a broader customer base. So if you have competition, financial institutions, bank or financial leasing company, what do? They will try to attract customers. How do you attract customers? You have to reduce your cost and you have to be competitive. So that is one of the major prerequisites basically to be innovative. Again, if this is done within the concept of a certain law that provide a basis for stability in the financial sector, and I think we can do so, yes.
Do you think we have enough competition? Is there a competitive spirit in the market?
It's not a matter of spirit, it's about the market. Look, I will tell you one thing for sure. For example, Oman, the market is relatively small compared to other major economies. Usually when you have a small market, you tend to have major players. When you have big markets, you tend to have more players that compete against each other. You cannot, for example, compare the size of the market for Oman and the US, and it wouldn't be fair in terms of how competitive the industry is. But nonetheless, in Oman, there are some element that is competitive in the market. For example, in the financial market, if you go to Bank Muscat, if you go to NBO or any other bank, they all provide you with different facilities and products in order to attract you as a customers. It is there. But nonetheless, we have certain banks like Bank Muscat that are dominant in the market. That is a fact of life. Again, this is simply because of the size of the market. The market you serve is very small. You're bound to have one or two players usually that are more dominant than others. But yet, I think the banking sector in Oman is still very competitive. Yes.
The banking sector is.
Yes. And the financial sector, I would say, financial leasing company as well. Okay. And I believe they're still very competitive, yes.
We'll take a short break. Our guest is Dr. Khalfan Mohammed Al-Barwani, Vice President, Investment and Market Operation, Central Bank of Oman, and he is the member of the Economic Diversification Pillar of National Innovation Strategy, supervised and facilitated by the Research Council. We'll be back.
The Institutional and Social Integration Pillar focuses on the empowerment of effective communication and cooperation between the relevant stakeholders in a way that achieves harmony between policymakers on one hand and between the institutions that produce, support, and benefit from innovation on the other hand.
You are listening to the National Innovation Strategy.
And what we've learned in that industry, I mean, if you look at the Oman economy itself, you see great performance in the oil and gas, the banking sector, the financial sector, and then you want to see more in manufacturing, in minerals, and minerals, I guess we are in the starting stages. What would you recommend to take in the same lead as these sectors?
Absolutely. As part of the economic diversification, as I mentioned earlier, we have Tanfidh now. 5 key critical sectors have been identified.
Logistics.
Absolutely. Logistics, tourism, fisheries, mineral, and manufacturing. Manufacturing primarily petrochemical, because that can give us an advantage. We are a hydrocarbon-based economy. Oman has potentials. Like many other oil-producing countries in the past, Oman history, let me go back to the history a little bit. You cannot compare Oman, for example, in Norway. When Norway discovered oil, Norway had infrastructure ready. They had schools, and they have universities, and they had road. Oman was different, because when oil started being produced at economic level, where we could export significant quantities, we needed resources basically to build schools and road after the advent of His Majesty in 1970. So we need to build the infrastructure, we need to build schools. So most of our resources that was generated from selling hydrocarbon resources were used to build infrastructure at school and hospital and so on and so forth. But later on, as you can see, we start diversifying a little bit. But the challenge for Oman, like many other oil-producing countries, is one thing about oil is you get off the ground, especially when the oil price is very high. And if your cost of production is very low, the profit margin is very high. So there is often a temptation to sell the oil at a very, as soon as you get off the ground, rather than develop downstream industries, which can have value addition.
And instead of giving it as a raw material.
Absolutely. As you know very well, from oil, medicines are being produced, beauty products are being produced, and many other things. Plastics can come from hydrocarbon, and this can have value addition in the economy. But we have started doing that. We have invested now in petrochemical, we have Orpik, we have the Dokum refinery, and others part that are coming up to Oman. And with respect to tourism, Oman, as you know, has huge potential. It's a beautiful country, and we have huge potential. But the key is to market ourselves internationally and to make sure the tourism sector is sustainable. Because tourism as an industry is, how to put it, the two-edged sword, as they say.
Yes.
If you have excessive tourism, it can also be destructive. But we have to make sure it's sustainable. Nonetheless, Oman has huge potential. We can have targeted tourism, and I think we have huge potential here. It's a beautiful country. The north is different from the south. and the seasons are also different. As I said earlier, manufacturing primarily based on hydrocarbon-based type of resources, energy type industry that consume gas and fuel, in order to produce. That we can do in Oman. We have a long coastline, almost 3,000 kilometers, where we can use for fisheries, aquacultures, onshore and offshore. Minerals. Oman has minerals. Maybe with more exploration we can find more. I don't have enough information on that aspect, but we have huge potential in Oman. But the challenge was, as was before, is we had to build infrastructure, and for some time the oil price was too high, and we didn't have really, I believe, a channel attention to develop this sector. With Tanfidh, I think the way forward is to promote these 5 sectors, and through domestic investment as well as encouraging foreign direct investment to come to Oman. Yes.
And that could be one of the major ways.
Absolutely. That's, I would say, is one of the main way to do so. And hopefully, and I think we'll be successful. And the potential is there. And it's how we do it, how quickly and how effectively we do it.
Quickly, that's a key word.
Yes. But again, we have to be patient. And quickly, it could be 1, it could be 5, it could be 10 years. But the thing is, as I said earlier, about foreign direct investment, it takes a little bit of time. Yes. Investors have to come and study the country. They have to see what's going on. And some of the projects will take maybe 3-4 years to complete. I mean, some of these projects are very huge. You cannot have a petrochemical complex within 1 year and expect it to create job and knock-on effect. It takes a little bit of time. But within 5-6 years time, and I think the potential is there for Oman to grow.
But we are seeing the talks on renewable energy, for example, even going through the pillars of the National Innovation Strategy, intellectual property. These are different careers even that are being built up.
Absolutely.
So at the same time, we should also plan in advance, isn't it?
Yes. Again, as I said earlier, what you need is to have a certain platform to make sure these things happen. Alternative source of energy and sun. We have plenty of sun in Oman that we can benefit from. As you know, there have been some investment already in that area. Wind energy. We have mountains in Oman that they can be exploited and see how cost beneficial they are. But at the end of the day, whatever you do in terms of renewable energy, you have to make sure that you cost beneficial in terms of industry. But again, if you look, for example, the solar energy, it has improved tremendously. The cost of production used to be very high before. With innovation, new ideas, the cost of production has decreased. And over time, I think Oman in this area has also huge potential. One of the key examples we have in the oil sector in Oman, they start using solar energy for some of the activities, I believe. And I see only hope forward. But again, it's how you do it, if there is a will to do it, and if you have a good platform to do it.
Excellent. Now, finally, my last question. Most of the innovators find it difficult to sustain. I'm talking